Nathaniel Gray had always been proud of his strong determination. He believed that nothing could shake his willpower. His life was like a carefully built machine where every small part worked perfectly under his control. He had planned everything with great care, making sure that nothing was out of place. Nathaniel never believed in love because, in his mind, he didn't need it, or at least that's what he always told himself. Love was something messy, something unpredictable, and, most of all, something unnecessary. It made people lose focus, weakened their will, and left them open to pain. It clouded a person's judgment and made them vulnerable. He had spent years building Gray Enterprises from nothing. Brick by brick, deal by deal, he had turned it into a powerful company through his sheer determination and his unstoppable drive to succeed. To him, emotions were a distraction, an unnecessary luxury that he simply could not afford. But then came Elena Carter. It was never supposed to happen this way. She was not meant to change anything in his life. She had entered his world as nothing more than a business necessity, a medical consultant hired to help with the Kingsley Pharmaceuticals merger. Her job was simple: ensure that everything in the deal ran smoothly and that all medical aspects were handled with precision. That was all. Nothing more. At first glance, she seemed just like any other intelligent and highly skilled professional, someone with sharp eyes, a quick mind, and quiet confidence that naturally earned her respect. She was efficient, professional, and completely focused on her work. But there was something about her, something hard to explain, that made her different from everyone else. Most people walked carefully around Nathaniel, afraid of his power and reputation. Many avoided eye contact, too nervous to speak their minds. Others agreed with him simply because they feared his cold, calculating personality. But Elena Carter was different. She did not fear him. She did not hesitate to speak up. When others stayed silent, she challenged him. When others nodded in agreement, she questioned his decisions. And somehow, she always made him listen. At first, their interactions were nothing special. They exchanged emails, sat in meetings together, and worked late into the night, reviewing documents and legal contracts. Their relationship was purely professional, built only on work. But then, something changed. Small moments began to creep in, moments so tiny that neither of them acknowledged them, but both of them felt them. A glance held just a second too long across the meeting table, a flicker of a smile when their opinions matched, a shared laugh over some ridiculous legal clause hidden deep within a long contract. These moments should have meant nothing. They should have been insignificant. And yet they weren't. Because no matter how much Nathaniel tried to ignore them, those moments lingered. Long after the workday ended, long after he returned to his empty, perfectly organized home, he still thought about them. He still thought about her. Nathaniel tried to push these thoughts away. He told himself it was nothing, just exhaustion or stress. After all, he was a man who lived for control, and these strange feelings were a threat to everything he had worked so hard to build. He couldn't afford distractions, so he ignored them. He buried himself even deeper in his work, staying longer at the office, filling every second of his day with meetings, calls, and negotiations. He convinced himself that once the deal was done, Elena would disappear from his life, just like everyone else had. But then fate stepped in. On the night the deal was finally completed, everything changed. One moment, Nathaniel was at the center of the celebration, shaking hands, receiving congratulations, and standing tall in the glow of another business victory. The next moment, his world went black. He collapsed without warning. The voices in the room blurred into panic, shouting, gasping, calling his name. Confusion spread like wildfire. People rushed around, unsure of what to do. Everyone froze, except for Elena. While others stood in shock, she acted. She didn't hesitate, didn't panic. Instead, she moved with swift confidence, her medical training taking over. She dropped to his side, quickly assessing the situation with steady hands and sharp focus. Before anyone else could even react, she was calling an ambulance. Her voice remained firm, clear, and calm despite the chaos swirling around her. Even as the paramedics arrived and carried him away, Elena never left his side. She climbed into the ambulance with him, her presence unwavering, her expression filled with quiet determination. And when they reached the hospital, she stayed, waiting, watching, refusing to leave until the doctors finally assured her that Nathaniel was stable. For the first time in years, Nathaniel wasn't in control. And yet, strangely enough, he didn't mind, because in the middle of all the uncertainty, all the fear, Elena was there. And somehow, that brought him comfort. Then came the news that shook his entire world. The doctors ran tests, examined his condition, and delivered their verdict, an undiagnosed heart condition. The years of endless stress, late nights, and relentless ambition had taken a toll on his body. The doctors warned him in clear, serious voices. If he didn't slow down, the consequences would be severe. But slowing down was something Nathaniel Gray did not do. His whole life had been about building, pushing forward, striving for more. He had spent decades creating his empire, sacrificing sleep, personal relationships, and any form of emotional connection for success. He had given up so much, all for ambition. So how was he supposed to change now? How could he? Elena visited Nathaniel every single day while he was recovering. She brought him updates on the project, making sure he stayed informed about everything happening at Gray Enterprises. But she didn't just talk about work. She encouraged him too. She spoke softly, her voice filled with warmth and concern, but there was also a firmness to her tone. She wasn't just there to check on him. She was there to push him to take care of himself. One evening, as she sat beside his hospital bed, she looked at him with quiet determination and said, "You can't keep living like this." Nathaniel turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You're not invincible, Nathaniel." Her words hit something deep inside him, but he refused to let it show. His jaw tensed, and his fingers curled slightly against the hospital sheets. "I don't have a choice," he snapped. But his voice lacked its usual sharpness. It wasn't the cold, commanding tone he used in boardrooms or negotiations. Even now, as weak as he was, he still clung to his belief that showing vulnerability was the same as showing weakness. But Elena didn't back down. She held his gaze, unwavering. "You always have a choice," she said, her voice steady. "Let someone help you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Her words lingered in the air, settling into the cracks he had spent years trying to seal. And then, without warning, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. It was so fleeting, so gentle, that if he hadn't been fully aware, he might have thought he imagined it. To her, it was probably just a small gesture of comfort, a way to reassure a man who refused to admit he was struggling. But to him, it was something much more. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a crack in the walls he had built around his heart. And it terrified him. The next morning, when he woke up, she was gone. Her absence felt strange, unnatural even. He had grown used to her presence, the sound of her voice filling the quiet, the way she always seemed to know exactly what to say. But now, the chair beside his bed was empty, and then her resignation letter arrived. It was brief, impersonal, just a few cold lines stating that she was leaving for personal reasons. No explanations, no goodbyes, just words on paper that cut deeper than he expected. Nathaniel told himself it didn't matter. She was just another employee, just another part of the machine. But the empty feeling that settled inside him told a different story. Months passed. Nathaniel threw himself back into work. He worked harder than ever before, refusing to slow down. Deals were made, profits skyrocketed. Gray Enterprises became even more powerful. On paper, everything was perfect. But underneath, something was wrong. Late at night, in the silence of his penthouse, he felt it. The loneliness, the regret, the memories of her. He would stand by the massive windows, staring out at the city below, and no matter how much he tried to push her from his mind, she was always there. The sound of her laughter echoed in his ears. The memory of her touch lingered on his skin. No matter how hard he worked, how many deals he closed, how much success he achieved, he couldn't forget her. 6 months passed. Nathaniel buried himself in work, filling every moment with meetings, deals, and expansion plans. He told himself that time would erase her memory, that one day he would wake up and she would no longer haunt his thoughts. But that day never came. And then at a charity gala, he saw her again. The moment he stepped into the grand ballroom, filled with dazzling lights and elegantly dressed guests, his eyes found her. It was as if some invisible force pulled him in her direction. She looked stunning. Elena stood across the room wearing a simple yet elegant gown that highlighted her natural grace. Her hair was swept back, revealing the same strong, determined expression he remembered so well. Even surrounded by a sea of people, she was the only one he could see. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time stopped. Nathaniel didn't think, he moved. His heart pounded in his chest as he crossed the distance between them, his steps quick, urgent. He didn't care about the people watching, the whispered conversations trailing in his wake. When he reached her, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. You disappeared. His voice was low, but it was filled with emotion, accusation, hurt. 1,000 unspoken questions. Elena hesitated, her carefully composed mask slipping, just for a second. It was for the best. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. His frustration, the months of confusion and unanswered questions, finally boiled over. Best for who? He demanded. She flinched at his sharp tone but didn't look away. Do you have any idea what it's been like trying to forget you? For the first time, her confidence wavered. Her breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the champagne glass she held. She averted her gaze, staring at some distant point beyond him. Nathaniel. She started, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Then she took a deep breath, steadied herself, and finally met his eyes. You don't believe in love. Her words hit like a punch to the chest. I didn't want to be another regret in your life. Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. He clenched his fists at his sides, failing to find the right words. You weren't a regret. His voice was rough, raw. He struggled for more. Something to explain what she had meant to him. You were something else entirely. A shadow of pain crossed her face. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but then stopped herself. She shook her head, blinking back the moisture in her eyes. We're too different. Her voice wavered now, heavy with emotions she could no longer hide. You build walls, and I... Nathaniel stepped closer. His voice was barely a whisper, but the words carried the weight of a realization he had been fighting for months. You tear them down. Elena swallowed hard, visibly shaken. Her fingers trembled slightly as she let out a shaky breath. What do you want from me, Nathaniel? He didn't know. Not fully. All he knew was that he couldn't let her walk away again. The truth. Nathaniel needed answers, and he was going to get them. Determined to understand why she had left, he dug into Elena's past. What he discovered shocked him. The name Cyrus Alden kept appearing, a ruthless, cutthroat businessman and one of Nathaniel's most dangerous rivals. Cyrus had uncovered Nathaniel's medical condition, and he had used it against Elena. Nathaniel read the reports, piecing together the truth. Cyrus had threatened her. He had given her an impossible choice. Stay with Nathaniel and watch his secret be exposed to the world, destroying everything he had built, or walk away, disappear from Nathaniel's life, so his empire would remain untouchable. And she had chosen to leave, not because she wanted to, but because she believed it was the only way to protect him. Nathaniel felt pure fury rush through his veins as he put the pieces of the puzzle together. Cyrus had manipulated her. He had used her kindness against her. He had forced her to make an impossible choice, driving a wedge between them. And for that, Nathaniel vowed revenge. He did not hesitate. In front of hundreds of shareholders, during a highly publicized meeting, Nathaniel confronted Cyrus. He exposed his corruption, revealing every shady deal, every unethical decision, every hidden crime. Piece by piece, he dismantled Cyrus's empire. There was no escape, no way for Cyrus to recover. By the time Nathaniel was finished, his enemy had been completely ruined. But Nathaniel wasn't done yet. With Cyrus out of the way, his focus shifted to the one thing that mattered most, Elena. Finding her again. Nathaniel tracked her down. He searched until he found her in a small, modest clinic where she spent her days working tirelessly to help people who had nowhere else to go. When he walked inside, unannounced, his heart pounded in his chest. He had spent months imagining this moment. And then, there she was. Elena turned, her eyes widening in shock as she saw him standing there. You fought for me. Her voice was barely above a whisper, filled with disbelief. Nathaniel stepped closer. His voice was calm, steady, but inside, a storm was raging. You fought for me first. For a moment, she just stared at him as if trying to understand if this was real or just a dream. Then, slowly, tears began to spill down her cheeks. She searched his face, her voice shaking. Nathaniel, do you even know what you're saying? He let out a sharp breath, no longer holding back the emotions he had spent so long suppressing. I told myself I'd never fall in love. His voice was raw, filled with truth. But here I am, standing in front of you, unable to imagine my life without you. Elena's lips trembled. She lifted her hand but hesitated, as if afraid that if she touched him, he might disappear. I never stopped loving you. And in that moment, everything changed. The walls Nathaniel had built, the ones that had kept everyone out for so long, came crashing down. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms. He held her tightly, as if she were the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel understood what it meant to truly let someone in. Rebuilding what was lost. In the months that followed, Nathaniel and Alina rebuilt their relationship. It wasn't easy. Both of them carried scars from the past. Nathaniel struggled to let go of his need for control. Elena had to learn to trust again, but they never gave up. Alina's patience, kindness, and unwavering support helped Nathaniel see that love wasn't about weakness. It wasn't about losing control or making sacrifices that erased who you were. Love was about becoming something greater. Together. A future built on love. Years later, they stood hand in hand at the grand opening of the Gray Carter Foundation. Nathaniel looked at Alina, then at the people whose lives they had changed. This was their journey. From a man who once believed love was a distraction to someone who cherished it above all else. He had grown, evolved, changed, and through it all, one thing had remained constant: Elena. She had been his light, his anchor, his home, and he knew, without a doubt, she always would be.